Okay, hello everyone. I can see people are still entering the room to join us for our webinar today. I'm going to get cracking because we have so much to discuss with our speakers, but welcome for everybody that is joining us at the minute. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. You just joined SheCanCode's Why Empathy is the Most Important Business Skill You'll Ever Learn Working in Tech, and that's our live webinar for today. I'm your host, Katie Batesman, the Content Director at SheCanCode. For those tuning in who aren't familiar with us, SheCanCode is a global community with a mission to close the tech gender gap. We use content, marketing, and events to engage, inspire, and attract more diverse communities to the tech sector. Now, before I introduce our wonderful speakers, please note we have a live Q&A session running today, so please submit your questions throughout, and we will try and get to them at the end. So let's kick off with my three fabulous guests who are taking time out of their very busy days to join us today. I have Nicole Yip, Principal Engineer, Marketing and Channels Technology at the Lego Group, Nathan Baggs, Head of Technology, Training and Graduates at Maven Securities, and Steve Janaway, VP of Engineering at Bloom and Wild. Thank you everybody for joining us on our panel today. A pleasure to have you all with us. We're going to quickly run around and introduce everybody so we can hear a little bit about you, where you're from, and how you ended up working at your company. Nicole, should we start with a little bit about you, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Nicole Yip, and I'm currently a principal engineer at the Lego Group. I've been in engineering for around 8 years now, mostly in DevOps and the infrastructure space. And that was just helping project teams get up and running, mostly in AWS, from their development environments through to production. I started working in Australia. I'm originally from New Zealand, and now I'm over here in the UK. And at the Lego Group, I've been taking our engineering teams working on the retail store on lego.com to go on their DevOps journey. And I started as an infrastructure engineer, became an engineering manager, and now I'm a principal engineer. So that's a bit about my journey.
Incredible journey so far, Nicole. Steve, a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So yeah, my name's Steve. I'm VP Engineering for Bloom and Wild. We're Europe's largest online flower delivery company. I've been there just over 6 years. So when we were a very, very small startup up to the sort of size of business we are now, we're a much bigger multi-brand business. I've been in technology for, 23 years now. So at a variety of different companies. I joined Bloom and Wild from a company called the Net-a-Porter Group. So went from luxury fashion to flowers. So it's lovely to be here today.
And you went to a smaller company as well, so you're going to have lots of great experience of working at the time a smaller company that grew into a really big brand. So yeah, it's going to be a really good conversation today with lots of different experience from all of you. And Nathan, last but not least.
Hello. Yeah, so I've been a professional software engineer for about a decade now across a variety of industries. I started off as a graduate C++ developer straight out of university and kind of moved around a bit. So my current role is really focused on training, specifically for our interns and our graduates. So I help define the program. I work with our engineers to deliver it, and I even get to teach a bit of C++ myself, which is nice. So
amazing. Is you've all got really interesting and slightly different backgrounds. So as I said, the conversation is going to be super interesting today. I'm all so grateful that all of you took time out of your super busy days to come and have a chat with us about empathy in tech. It is a conversation that we've had on the podcast before. It is very popular. Shameless plug for our podcast if anybody wants to listen to Spilling the Tea. And off the back of that, we decided to do a live discussion on this as well. So we have lots to get through, so we're going to get started with our discussion today. Nicole, we're going to go to you first and ask, why is empathy considered a crucial skill in business?
I was so nervous to be kicking off this panel, to be honest. I actually asked my boss earlier this question, and he took a really interesting angle on it. He said that business is a human-centric thing. It's this concept we create for people to collaborate together and pull together to achieve some kind of value. And empathy is at the core of that, because in order for any of that to happen, you need trust. You need trust to bridge any gaps, to be able to be brave, to be able to fail, and still be able to work together in a commercial setting. In technology, it's even more important because you need empathy with your users. If you're going to build something that your users in the end don't actually want, you're not going to succeed as a company. But yeah, I see empathy as being crucial because of the trust that it builds. Trust is one of those things that once you lose it, there's no getting it back to the level that you started with. And empathy helps understand where someone's coming from. It helps understand why someone has decided to say those words, to do that action, and you start to kind of understand why that happened, so to speak.
Yes, definitely. I love the fact as well that you pointed out that it's not just about empathy within your workplace and your team, but it's empathy and trust that is created with your users as well. And as you said, that can so easily be broken, and that is quite hard to fix, especially as a brand. If you've broken that trust and you haven't developed that empathy with your users, I couldn't agree more. Nathan, what is your experience, do you think, with empathy? Why is it considered a crucial skill in business?
I mean, it's really hard to add to what was such a great answer there, but I think I'd approach definitely just sort of add to that and just say that it really is the human factor that kind of underpins it all, and empathy is such a innate human facet. So really, you can't really embody and support people without really embodying empathy at your core.
Yes, I agree. It's something that I think in business, perhaps we don't think of it as a key skill. It's not something that people would put up there with one of those key things to think about in terms of business. But actually, really successful businesses put empathy at the forefront of the way that they work, as we said, as a team, and also with their customers as well. So you are absolutely right in terms of way that we work together. Steve, I wanted to ask you a little bit about in what ways can empathy drive innovation within a company, especially in the tech industry?
Yeah, I think so much of it's about care and about showing care, but I think there's been let's call it an accusation a little bit within the tech industry that we don't care about our customers well enough, or we don't design solutions that maybe meet their problems. And sometimes we put multiple levels of abstraction between, say, technology teams and the customer. I think almost to kind of hide from that, whether behind product teams or customer success teams. But the key thing about empathy, we need to understand the customer. And if you can understand and you can empathize with the customer, you can understand what they want, what they need, what their motivations are. So you can appeal best to them. You can build the best solutions for them, for example. So I mean, maybe an example from Bloom and Wild. We were at the forefront of something called the thoughtful marketing movement. And this came out of wanting to allow our customers to opt out of occasion marketing that might be sensitive to them. So around occasions like, say, Mother's Day and Father's Day and so on and so forth. And we built solutions that allow us to not only opt people out now of email marketing, but also just opt out of all marketing across our sites. And they're really interesting technology problems to solve and really innovative problems to solve, but they're really at the heart of them is empathy and understanding our customers and being able to effectively build what works best for them. So, and that it not only helps you to retain customers, but it also helps you to gain customers and kind of build a buzz around it. But it's also really, really valuable inside. So if you're an engineer building those sorts of solutions, it feels like innovation. It feels good. It feels like you're doing something good. And I think that also really, really helps for folks like me to keep people engaged, keep people in my team engaged, keep them motivated and retained as well.
Yes, I couldn't agree more that you said about it. A misconception as well of working in technology is, people think that you're just going to be working on your solutions, you're going to be working on your own, for instance, and actually the things that you build as a technology company, you kind of lost touch with that care, and that you don't really care about customers. And I've heard this often, and I completely agree with you, Steve, because people that work in technology, they say it's almost like the tech industry has a brand problem, where unless you work in the industry, you don't realize that the solutions that you get to work on, they really make an impact. And if more people knew that you come in and you solve problems, and a lot of it is to do with empathy and showing care for users, for instance, the more people would be attracted to work in the industry. As you said, more people would be, talent would be retained. And you're absolutely right that there is this kind of this misconception that, you know, when you work in tech, you're not really thinking about your users. Is that something that you thought, though, Steve, before you came into tech? I mean, you've been in tech 23 years. What did you think of the industry before you came in? Did you know you would be working on projects like this?
I didn't know I would be, but when I started, I rapidly started to find the sorts of projects and the sorts of companies that I was interested in working in. So I spent a long period of my career working at Nokia, like back when Nokia was a thing, but working on handsets that were used in developing markets. And so handsets where somebody might save for a year maybe, or a village may all club together and buy one single handset and then form a business around that, just owning that handset. And that's a really rewarding thing to work on. And so I think those are the sorts of things that keep you motivated. I think there are some people that are just motivated by solving technology problems and cutting code, but I think that only lasts. You can only keep yourself interested for a certain period of time in that sort of model. Whereas if you feel like you're doing something good, then that's a great motivation in itself, I found.
Yes, definitely. And just you saying there about the companies that you choose to work for is so important. If you think that you're going into projects within those types of companies, you're going to work on different things. Nicole, I wanted to touch on go to you on that point. Every time I talk to somebody at the Lego Group, they tell me it's so magical to work at the Lego Group. And I assume that you join certain companies because you think you're going to work on certain projects. Is that something that you thought in terms of empathy and care and really working with your end users before you joined the Lego Group?
I think before I joined, when I was first looking for a new role, the Lego Group definitely stood out to me in terms of their value statement, their mission statement. Everything that they're trying to achieve is so consistent and focused. They want to get bricks in the hands of kids and users around the world. And so going into the team that I'm in, there is such a focus there around who are we trying to target? Do we really want to be so conversion focused when we're trying to, just get the bricks out there to kids? So there's a lot of engagement around the value statement of what is the features that we're building? Are we engaging people in the way that we want to engage them in, and things like that? So it's really awesome to see our user research department starting up and bringing kids and families in to represent these types of users that we have around the site. So yeah, it's amazing the value that the Lego Group has.
Yes, and you mentioned in there your research group. Nathan, I wanted to go back to the question about the ways, what ways can empathy drive innovation within a company, especially within the tech industry? Do you have any ways at Maven Security that you think empathy is driving innovation at your company?
Yeah, I think again, it's because it's kind of, it has multiple facets to this, right? Because the life cycle of your software touches everyone, so it's kind of really engaging with everyone along the way, and everyone who can have any impact on the code and on the products that you build, and kind of make sure everyone's invested and really, make sure that they're heard and they're valued and their needs are really kind of understood, and making sure that kind of goes all the way up and down the hierarchy of everyone, so everyone's kind of bought into the vision and kind of understands it.
Yes, definitely. You're absolutely right that everybody has to buy into that vision and how you're going to move forward with it. And Nathan, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how does empathy contribute to increased retention in a business setting, which is something that Steve touched upon earlier. It says if you don't create a feeling of empathy within your team, whether that's within your working team and how you work together or with your end user, good talent is just going to leave, isn't it? They're going to find another company that is already doing it. Yeah,
I think fundamentally, I'd say people want to work where they feel valued and where they feel heard. And empathy really is the thing that underpins that. It's hard for people to invest themselves in a business if that business isn't invested in them. And, there's a whole host of factors that make that up. I think, empathy, sort of that innate ability to understand how someone is feeling, really underpins that. Life and work, all have ups and downs, and any company that can support people through that are more likely to retain them.
Yes, agree. That feeling of as well being heard and being understood by your business is so important. I had a lady on the podcast recently who spoke to me about empathy within her own business, and she said it was the tiniest thing, but it made such a difference to that employee. And she said, I was changing the floor plan and the office layout, and I knew that there were a couple of employees that were quite nervous about where they were going to be moved to sit because we were hot desking. They couldn't pick their desk anymore. And she said, I knew that a few workers would really change their mindset coming to work. They would be nervous. And she said, I had to be empathetic towards them and think, how do I make you feel comfortable in the workplace? And to somebody else, it might not matter where you sit in the office. But these couple of individuals, she just knew it was going to ruin the working day. They weren't going to get the most out of that person. And she really had to make sure that they were happy with where they were going to go. And that felt okay. And I think just that tiniest little thing about feeling like you belong at a company and that somebody can hear you and hears your concerns can make all the difference, can't it? Nicole, what about yourself? How does empathy contribute to increased retention in a business setting, do you think?
There's not much more to add on top of what Nathan said, but it's being valued and also having that transparency and communication, feeling like decisions that are made high above you and are something that you can't influence is something that easily turns off highly motivated people. So having empathy to both ways, really, of communicating why things are happening, why decisions are being made, full stop, but also the empathy upwards of we need to make decisions, we need to have strategic decisions made, and that kind of dynamic can easily swing either way without empathy being considered on both ends. So that's all I'd like to add.
Yes, I agree. And that just having empathy about decisions as well. You work at a very large company. Steve, you mentioned that when you started at Bloom & Wild, they were a lot smaller and it's grown to a larger company. Having that empathy as you grow as a company, it must be so important, right? Because Nicole just touched upon a brilliant point there. When you make decisions, your employees need to feel like they're being heard, but also tough decisions sometimes need to be made. That's super important. Did you feel that way, Steve, at Bloom & Wild as you grew? Because you have to tackle things as you grow, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And I think making sure that you have a culture of care is the really important thing, and particularly as you scale. So when you're small, when there's sort of like when you can sit in a room, back when we all used to sit in the same offices, and you see everybody every day, you naturally understand them a little bit more, and you understand them a little bit more because they're there. You have conversations with them. You understand what they did last night. You understand what motivates them, and so on. As you grow and as you scale, obviously there'll come those occasions where you kind of come into the office and you realize you don't actually know who that person on the other side of the office is. But to a certain extent, that matters less if you have a company culture of overall care, because that person is a part of a team, and within that setting, those team members understand each other effectively, they support each other effectively. And as long as within your culture you have opportunities for people to understand each other and meet, and you have that culture of making sure you're thinking of the individual and their individual wants and their individual needs, then you can effectively replicate what you had when you were small in a much larger setting. And I mean, I think that's the main thing that I've learned as we've grown, is we've maintained that culture, and I think that's been incredibly important, because otherwise, people leave companies often because of the culture, or they leave companies because of either within their team or the culture of the company itself. And so making sure that those two are effectively supported, and the managers in a company are effectively supported, is really, really important.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Especially as you grow, you learn to adapt for the size. We had a conversation on here recently about how to give feedback when you are scaling as a company. The way that you give feedback is so different when you're a small company compared to when you are a large company, and just adapting to that and being mindful about the way that you give feedback and being empathetic towards your team in how that is delivered is so different. But as you said, and completely hit the nail on the head, if you are a company that just focuses on care, then that kind of naturally grows as you grow as well. Nicole, can you provide some examples of how empathy helps in connecting with a team and peers in the workplace?
Yeah, so empathy allows us to support other teams and team members by seeing behind their actions and the words that they use. It allows us to not assume intent, or at least assume positive intent. It avoids the us and them narrative. So like the example we were talking about before, it avoids the management versus the engineers type narrative, which is not constructive in any form. One example that I wrote down was an example between peers. So I'm an infrastructure engineer hiding in a software engineering team, essentially. People often project onto others their own reality, their own assumptions. And an example of how that manifests is the words that they decide to use. For example, I'm from New Zealand, so when I say pants, I mean what people in the UK call trousers. Very trivial example, but if I take that to an engineering example, when I say deploy as an infrastructure engineer, what you think deployment means as a software engineer may not be the same as what I mean. So empathy is what helps us close that gap. It stops us from having those assumptions that leads to misunderstandings, leads to what we focus on being different, and the outcomes of me going away and improving our deployment time, actually coming back and saying, our app now builds really fast. And all you actually wanted was to put the deployment steps in parallel. You know, just by using the words and understanding, coming to a common understanding of what words are you using to describe the outcome that you want, is a very simple way to see how empathy can form or can close the gaps just in your day-to-day interactions.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And actually, it ties back into what Steve said earlier about not always being in the office and how hard that can be when sometimes you get in, you don't know the person across the office, or you haven't seen them for a while. And it ties into what you just said there about the type of language. You kind of get used to your teammates and what they mean by what they say. And a lot of that, it hasn't been lost. It's just we're having to work slightly harder to ensure that we still care and show empathy for others. Nathan, what about yourself? Can you provide examples of how empathy helps in connecting with within teams and with peers in the workplace? Is there anything that you think where empathy has kind of played a big role?
Yeah, I think just sort of reflecting on that, I think it kind of helps build like a common understanding. So part of what I've done at Maven is before doing, taking all the graduate stuff, was building tools for our engineers. And so it's kind of useful to be able to speak to other engineers and kind of understand what their problems are and what their pain points are and the toil they suffer through on every day, and like how can we build a solution which kind of addresses the specific needs that you have, and really the ability to kind of empathize with someone and understand what they're going, what they're doing and how that can be better, and maybe help identify that in other people to find like common issues and so broad categories of problems that we can solve in one go kind of not only makes us more efficient, but kind of helps us really deliver real value to our end users, which in this case is other engineers.
Yeah, instead of just thinking that your role is just building solutions, you're asking them about the pain points of building those solutions, instead of, again, that would help with retention, wouldn't it? Instead of people just thinking we just are here to build things and nobody's going to ask us whether or not it went well and what our pain points were, but just stepping in with that little bit of empathy and asking, what are your pain points? How do we get around them? Is so important for retaining staff, especially if you're working with graduates as well, who tend to job hop often. In terms of that, though, Steve, do you think, is empathy a skill that can be taught, or is it just something, if you haven't got it, you just haven't got it?
Yeah, I think what you can teach is you can open people's eyes to why understanding other people's perspectives and supporting people effectively is important. So yeah, you can teach them things. You can teach people how to, for example, do active listening, and you can teach people about things like different body language cues and how to ask questions, and you can ask them to be open-minded and compassionate, for example. A lot of these things they're innately inside people. I think you sometimes just need to build the sorts of cultures and habits effectively that enables people to understand why they're important. So I don't know, I'll use an example. We always start our meetings with a little 5-minute check-in, where the whole point of that little check-in is just to say, how are you showing up to this meeting? And what that enables everyone in that session to do is understand how other people's perspectives. And I don't know, let's use an example. I might have had no sleep last night, for example. I'm going to show up very, very differently. And therefore, it's nice to have a kind of a scenario, and it's habitual that I'm quite comfortable saying, okay, I didn't get very much sleep last night. I'm in a grumpy mood today. And this might impact how I showed up to this meeting, or how I've reviewed this PR, or so on and so forth. So it's really about, you can teach the basics, and I think what you can most importantly do is you can put the framework in place so that from a company perspective, being open and understanding becomes habit, and then it becomes easy.
Yes, I agree. Someone actually put in the chat, I don't feel like my current workforce are very empathetic. So their question was, do you think empathy is a skill that can be taught? Which, funny enough, we had on our list today, because I completely agree. You were talking there about it just becoming culture and habit, and those tiny things that you do at the beginning of a meeting would really make a difference to the team, and it just becomes something that you're very used to. Nicole, Nathan, does that sound similar to what you both do in your organizations with meetings? How do yours work?
Do you want to go first, Nathan?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I don't think we have like a specific section for that, although I do like the idea, and I something that I would consider. But I definitely think we could operate in a very open environment, and such that if someone were to have any extenuating circumstances or anything around that, required, additional attention or any other support, then I think we would, maybe definitely be able to be in a place to support that.
Yeah. And do you think empathy can be taught, Nathan?
I think you can definitely learn to be more aware of others around you. I think you can learn that yours is not the only voice in the room if you definitely start off thinking that. And I think through that, you would naturally learn empathy just by naturally learning to start listening to others. That's my take on that.
Yes, completely agree. Nicole, do you agree? Do you think just sometimes just learning to listen to others, and also actively listening to others, I suppose, is another thing, instead of just thinking, yeah, I took that in, but actually you probably didn't.
Yeah, definitely. And something to reflect on is that at the Lego Group, we've been rolling out these trainings around raising the awareness of why empathy is important. And we've been doing these sharing sessions where you sign up for a training, you're put into a group of 20 people, and they'll share their lived experiences. And it's just that awareness of, oh, if you come from Italy, these words mean different things. Oh, if you're from this other country, that all of the cultural differences, the awareness that there is cultural differences that actually play a factor in the daily conversations you're having, that's a powerful curiosity moment, right? And that's what we're trying to spark at the Lego Group, those curiosity moments of, how is my language coming across to others? And I really want to take Steve's idea of having that check-in in meetings. I've got some people I'm going to mention that to already.
Yes, and that ties in nicely, because I wanted to talk a little bit, I wanted to go to you, Nathan, about what strategies can companies employ to foster and promote empathy among their workforce. And Nicole touched upon it a little bit there, even just learning about the types of language that each different cultures use. I mean, that's a great one. Are there any other strategies that you think companies could try?
Yeah, so I guess if the previous questions were, can individuals learn empathy, then I guess this question is more, can businesses learn empathy? And I think the key thing for me is that empathy, that it's not a box ticking exercise. There's no like ISO standard for being an empathetic organization. What really matters is like weaving it into everything you do, and it really has to be business as usual. For a more like concrete example, I think leading by example is what organizations can do and kind of really take forward. Like, You want this to be a quality that everyone embodies, like I said, as business as usual, because empathy is really a reciprocating effect, right? If you can show understanding to how someone else feels, then they're much more likely to show that back to you.
Yes, I completely agree. It is a two-way street there, especially as we touched upon earlier about what Steve said about not always being in the office as well. It's absolutely imperative that you learn to show empathy when you are in, because you are right, it does come back the other way. And I suppose in that way it can be taught in that way. Steve, what do you think about types of strategies that companies can employ to foster and promote empathy?
Yeah, I completely agree with the lead by example piece. And well, I guess just to add to that, I think from leadership downwards. So I think what's really, if you've got open, honest, compassionate leaders that are showing that they are open, honest, and compassionate, then it makes it safe to do so for others. And I think that's a really, really important piece. If you're not going to build a culture of empathy if your leaders are not seen to be empathetic. I think you can also do things like you can build it into the culture of your company. So, for example, one of our company values is care wildly. And we also have internally, you can recognize people for representing and doing something that aligns closely with our values. And so again, it's kind of continual easy promotion of care and empathy and understanding for others that can really, really help, because that is what will get folks to understand that your company really does value empathy and is really trying to kind of foster a culture.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I love that you mentioned recognizing people there. I think sometimes as well, people always think that within companies that's through an awards, or you might at the end of the year win a prize for doing something fantastic that you worked on. And actually there are smaller ways to do that every day. I worked at a company where we had almost like a message board where you could just put a little something about somebody that you worked with that day, and hey, thank you to so and so for helping me with this project. Like what you did helping me with that small task today really improved my day. And just being able to do that daily for colleagues, and also that comes back to you, is a real lift, especially if you're a larger company, because it is quite hard as you grow. It's quite hard to feel like you're not getting lost in that machine. And if you do have to wait until the end of the year, for instance, an award ceremony is lovely to have an internal award ceremony. It's kind of, you don't get that, on a daily basis amongst team members. So I couldn't agree more. It's sometimes the tiniest things that can really make a good culture. We're almost running out of time, and I have one more question that I want to get to. So Nicole, I'm going to go to you. How can leaders and managers actively demonstrate and promote empathy in their day-to-day interactions with employees? And Steve nailed it with, it has to come from the top down. If you don't see it from the top down, obviously you're not going to do well in terms of your culture. So how do you think they can actively demonstrate and promote empathy?
Yeah, it's exactly what Steve said. And it's essentially demonstrating vulnerability, being the first one to put yourself out there. And because empathy is a two-way street, because you kind of build up credits, the more that you share, the more others feel comfortable sharing with you. So demonstrating that vulnerability, but also bringing it into your coaching. When you're a leader or a manager, you are coaching the people that are reporting to you or around you. So what you choose to spend your time talking about, the things that you verbalize, the congratulations, the praises, the curious questions, those are the things that will get people thinking, to be more caring, to put themselves in other people's shoes. It puts them into another frame of mind. So yeah, vulnerability and coaching, the two things I wrote down.
Definitely, yes. I couldn't agree more. And I do believe as well what Steve said, that those coaching and vulnerability, showing that has to be shown from the top, and everybody else follows their lead there. Steve, I'm lying. I had one last question that I wanted to go to you for. Are there any potential challenges or misconceptions associated with promoting empathy in a business setting? Do we think there are misconceptions attached to empathy?
I think the biggest one is people see it almost as like a sign of weakness. If you're It's like you're asking about like how you're being open about how you feel. That means you must be weak. It doesn't. It means you're actually very, very open and very brave. And I think it's really important that we recognize that. And I think particularly, I guess, within technology settings and engineering settings, the more that we can get people to open up and understand that understanding each other is actually really, really important for everyone, the better. I think there's some other smaller things. People think that being empathetic takes too long. It's somehow irrelevant to business, and everything we've talked about today shows that whether we obviously believe it isn't. It's a very, very important trait to have, and a very important thing to have in companies.
Yes, definitely. Nathan, do you agree with that? There is a misconception sometimes that, as Steve said, it takes up too much time. It's seen as a weakness. I mean, throughout this conversation, we've kind of said actually it should be at the forefront of most businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to rebuild on Steve's main point there, because I think it's absolutely right. I think it's that misconception that it somehow shows like a sign of weakness or, unfitness for the role or whatever. And I mean, I personally disagree with that. And I think like more, especially on the leadership level, they should show more vulnerability, be openness when because mistakes get made all the time, up and down the leadership hierarchy. And I think having the courage to come forward to your company and say, no, I made a mistake and here's what we're going to do about it, I think that to me is much more of a leader of a company that I want to work at. Yes,
definitely. Somebody that really puts that at the forefront. And instead of having to guess what a company culture is like, you kind of already know. So we've all had that shock where you get into a company and you think, this is not what I thought it was going to be like. And sometimes that screening interview or those interview processes are not actually what it is like until you get into that culture. And then it's more how you feel every day whilst you're at work, instead of do you tick all of those boxes sometimes on that job application. There are a couple of questions that I wanted to ask in the live chat. Somebody has asked, how do you emphasize empathy as a transferable skill on your CV? I think this is so important. And now I saw a cartoon once that had the difference between being sympathetic to somebody and showing empathy. And it was literally, if somebody is, and they're sort of there on their own, and you just say to them, would you like a sandwich? That's being sympathetic, because it's not actually that helpful. You're just saying, oh, you're in that hole. Can I offer you a sandwich? But if you actually offer that person a way out of that hole and you help them, then that is showing empathy to somebody, that you're really putting yourself in their shoes. You are caring, which is something that a word has come up a lot today. And I think that as a transferable skill on your CV, especially if you're transferring into technology for the first time, that's invaluable, isn't it? I mean, this lady in here that is asking about how do you emphasize that on your CV? I would definitely, say that for starters, just put it on your CV. Would you all agree with that? That it is a good skill?
I think, yeah, if you can capture that, I know there's sort of this idea that CVs have to be as small and as slimline as possible, but I think if you can definitely like capture the example that, an example of when that happened and the impact that had, on that person, then I think that definitely shines through when reading a CV.
Yeah, and I guess just to, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just to the, I think it's actually a real value of people that are moving into technology from non-technology careers as well. It's that kind of roundness of experience that you maybe don't get if you've just you've gone to uni, you've done a comp sci degree, you've moved straight into an engineering role, and then you've worked your way up. So I think being able to represent that effectively on your CV, and really importantly, being able to talk about it with a sensible narrative and in a really passionate way in an interview, I think it's actually a real value. I think if I'm looking at folks coming into tech, those are the sorts of things I want, because it's a great way of being able to seed my team with more of that and make sure that I've got a real good balance.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And actually, Nicole, that brings me back to something you said earlier about learning about other people's cultures and the language that they use. Because Steve, if you're looking for people that are well-rounded, you want those type of people on your team, then you you don't want somebody on your team that is kind of going to think, actually, I don't want to be involved in those sorts of things. You know, you kind of want somebody that's going to move forward and learn and be empathetic towards other team members. I mean, that's a brilliant skill to have. To the lady that asked that, I would definitely emphasize that on your CV. We have time for one last question I can see in here. And somebody has said, I feel like my co-workers sometimes take advantage of the fact that I'm helpful and understanding. Is there a way to have empathy without gaining additional tasks and responsibilities? Anybody want to jump in with that one? Anyone ever felt that way?
Yes. Yeah, because I've been in infrastructure and fairly central roles, you tend to fall into the support mode. And so everyone comes to you with questions on, I couldn't figure out this thing, maybe you can help me figure it out. The way to have empathy in that and not take on too much is empathy goes both ways. You can be vulnerable and share that I've got all of this on my plate. How urgent is this? Is there anyone else who can help you? Can you help me with, give and take type of thing? Can you help me with this thing and I'll help you with that thing? Just share, be open with what is on your plate. What are you currently working on? Is it an opportunity for someone else to grow and you can help in a coaching or a pairing mode on that kind of thing? So there are mechanisms to still do that in a caring way and still be helpful. It's not the, no, I can't help you and shut the door. It's the, I've got all of this. What do you think? Like open the door to give them that insight into what you're going through as well.
Yes, I love that. And to work it into more of a coaching and a mentoring side of things, you're absolutely right. Because also something that we've discussed on this webinar before is about learning how to say no as well, and just being okay with that. And it's okay to set boundaries at work and that you don't have to take everything on board. Steve, Nathan, have you ever felt that way at work where, sometimes you think I'm being helpful, but actually I just took on a load of other stuff that I didn't want to do?
I think, yeah, just to build on that point, I think when someone comes to you with a problem, that problem is the biggest thing in their world at the moment. And, they're probably, it's blocking them from doing something. So, and I think people just want to be heard and acknowledged, and yes, I understand that is a problem, and yes, we will do what we can, within the constraints of what we've got and everything. But I think people, if you can just acknowledge that problem and have it recorded somewhere, so it's not kind of, people don't want to just shout into the void and have all their, feel like all their issues and complaints are just not being listened to. So I think, and that's where the empathy comes in, is to be able to sort of say, we do acknowledge this, and here's some steps that we can take, and here's how we can at least have a plan of getting a plan together.
Yes, which is an easier way to field questions and just saying, I do hear you, and we can put together a plan. Steve, yourself.
Yeah, I've had this multiple times. I think I can't really add an awful lot to what's already been said. I think what's already been said is great. I think the kind of key thing is just, to make sure that folks have got an understanding of you as much as you've got an understanding of them, and that they feel like you think their problem is important. And
yes.
and if you do that, and as Nathan says, if you end up, if the answer is yes and later, or indeed no because, or can I find you somebody else who can help that, then it's open and it gives a way forwards, and often that's what people want.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And again, that is built into company culture, and it's not something that is achieved overnight. And obviously, good companies really try hard to ensure that environment is built and stays there as well. We are already out of time. It's flown by, and I could talk to you all for another 45 minutes on these subjects, but we are already out of time. So thank you, Nathan, Nicole, and Steve. Thank you so much for taking time out of your super busy days to join me today. It's been a pleasure chatting with each and every one of you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you, Steve. And Nathan, thank you so much for taking time out. I know all of you are super busy, but thank you so much. Our listeners, thank you as always for joining us. If you check SheCanCode.io tomorrow, we will have a recording of this available for you, which we also send out to anybody that didn't make it, and we send it out to our community tomorrow. And please check out SheCanCode.io for extra resources, free training, free career advice, everything else that you can imagine that is free that you can find on our wonderful resource hub. But in the meantime, thank you so much, listeners, for joining us as always. And we hope to see you again on our next webinar in November. Thank you all.